what this kind of stakeholders' biggest goals are that they're trying to achieve in their professional life. What's super important to them for them to get a promotion, for them to get to the next level, to get a big bonus? How does that fit in with their team's goals? How does that fit in with their company's goals? And besides goals, we also need to get a grasp on what they're struggling with, what their biggest stressors are, what are their biggest challenges, what are the things that are causing them to have to pull all-nighters, what are the things that are causing them to miss time away from their friends and family and loved ones. Hello, data center friend. Good afternoon. Maybe it's good morning. It might even be good evening. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live stream. Over at DCSMI, we are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals, GTM professionals, in the growth of the data center industry. And each week, I answer a handful or so of the most pressing questions on the mind of the entire GTM team across marketing, sales development, account executives, customer success, account managers, product managers, channel managers, and executive sponsors across the entire data center ecosystem. It doesn't matter whether you work for a data center operator, maybe you're part of a co-location or hyperscale or wholesale data center or edge or modular company, or perhaps you're from a technology company that sells to or partners with data centers, or perhaps you're do something facilities related in and around the data center ecosystem, or maybe you're in real estate or construction, or perhaps your company does some kind of outsourced marketing or sales for the data center ecosystem. But either way, if you're serious about leveling up, if you're serious about growing your influence, growing your team, growing your company in and around the data center ecosystem, you're for sure in the right place. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg, and this week we're going to be diving into some of the most pressing questions that you have asked. If you want a question raised for consideration for a future episode of the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, feel free to drop that in the comments or wherever you're listening in from, and we'll add it to the queue for an upcoming episode. To make sure that you get notified about upcoming live streams and episodes just like this, make sure to follow or subscribe on the channel that you're watching this on, or visit the DCSMI website and subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes to your email inbox every Sunday. And again, you can subscribe to that directly on our website at www.dcsmi.com. So this week, we're going to be talking about 6 questions. The first one is, how can a data center infrastructure and construction company manage bid review lead times? How can they get on top of the lead times for bid review when it comes to infrastructure and construction of data centers? Next question we'll be talking about is, how can a fiber, wireless, or traditional internet services company get new customers? Then we'll turn our attention to sales and marketing strategies for Tier 3 data centers. After that, we'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. And when we come back, we will look at how can a digital power channel manager get bigger data center sales. Next, we'll look at how to sell green energy solutions to data center locations. And then we'll head down the home stretch for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show by talking about how to find new server technology hardware customers. So without any further, let's jump right into this week's first question. So first up is, how can a data center infrastructure and construction company manage bid review lead times? When you're trying to get a handle on the lead time that you have to submit bid reviews, it's likely because your company wants to have more time to figure out what this potential client actually needs, so you can prepare a more thoughtful bid. And with that in mind, the best way that you can get the inside track is to become an insider with that company. How do you become an insider with that company? Well, you figure out a way to be seen differently. So you're not just a vendor, so that you're seen as a teacher, as a trusted advisor, as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader. And the way that we accomplish that is we need to understand exactly who these companies are that we're going to be doing these bids with for data center infrastructure and construction. So if your company already has a well-established track record, then I want you to go to your website and look at your case studies page and figure out exactly what these clients have in common for infrastructure and construction. Are they all located in a certain geographic region? Are they a certain size from smallest to largest? Are they certain industries? Are they certain business models? Understanding the commonalities at the company level will help you craft a ideal client profile, what's called an ICP. Once you have an ideal client profile, then I want you to think carefully about who the most important stakeholders are that you need to be building relationships with in these companies. And in order to do this successfully, we're going to do something called buyer persona research. Buyer persona research. What is that? Well, we need to understand what the people that we want to build relationships with at these companies have in common. What are their biggest goals that they're trying to accomplish individually, at the team level, at the company level, relative to this particular stakeholder? And what are their biggest challenges, their struggles, their frustrations that they're going through right now? And again, both of these should ideally be at the intersection of what you do from your company's infrastructure and construction perspective, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. What we're most concerned about is understanding what is going on in their lives, what's going on in their professional lives, and how can we add value to the goals that they're trying to achieve and the challenges that they're struggling with most. Once we know that, then we can go about developing a content strategy, a way to educate and build trust with the most important stakeholders. And what your first buyer persona that you're concentrating on the most, we'll call that your primary buyer persona. There's probably at least another category, perhaps two more categories of stakeholders that you want to build relationships with at these companies. We'll call them like a secondary or a tertiary buyer persona, so you can prioritize resources accordingly. And again, we go through the same research process. The reason this is super important is in order for us to gain a virtual seat at the table with these companies early on in their research and comparing options and evaluating pricing, long before they put out to bid, we need to get our foot in the door as a teacher, as a trusted advisor, as a consultant, as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader. And that's super important because the latest research from Gartner found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before a company is open to sales conversations, or in this particular case, going out to bid. So how do we make sure that we're not just excluded from the first 83% and we only get a chance to get invited in that final 17%? It's content, it's empathy, it's walking a mile, kilometer, or lots of miles or kilometers in their shoes, so we understand exactly what's going on in their professional lives, what's going on in their team, what's going on in their business, and how we can add value to that by sharing unique insights that help them address their biggest goals, that help them solve their biggest problems. And most of all, anticipate what they're going to want to know next that they haven't even asked yet or haven't even thought about yet. How do we anticipate that? Because we've looked at the pattern recognition. We looked at the kind of companies that we've done well with in the past. And we know for a construction manager of a wholesale data center company, this is how they typically come in the front door with us. This is what they typically want to know second and third and fourth and fifth. And anticipating all those steps is super important because it's not just that we want to have a dominant role in the first 83% of that buyer's journey when all of the researching and comparing options happens. So they fall in love with our content and our events, and by extension, they fall in love with our brand. It's super important because a typical buyer's journey between complete stranger and purchase decision has dozens, typically about 28 different touch points that need to happen between when they just start figuring out that there's something they need to achieve or something they need to solve. So how do we get in on as many of those touch points as possible so we get an insider's track and perspective of the thought process on the entire committee that's going to end up ultimately in their bid? It's by using content. And how do we spread that from one person, from our primary buyer persona, to other people on the team? Well, it's really simple. When we invest in creating great, helpful educational content and we host great, helpful educational events like this, like a Q&A, like a webinar, like an online class, master class, or even offline versions of that, it's a really simple ask once somebody registers or downloads, like, hey, building a data center, it takes a village. It takes a really large village, and it typically involves stakeholders in this role, this job function, that job function. So, with that in mind, who else should be reading this ebook? Who else might benefit from this planning template? Who else should attend this webinar? And when you do this well, you start to look in your CRM, your customer relationship management system. You're like, cool, like 4, 5, 6 people from the same company are downloading our content, registering for our webinar, and it happened within a few minutes or an hour or so of each other. I bet they're passing our stuff around. And that's exactly what you need to get. You need to get them passing your content, your event information around, because the more people that show up from that company and see you as helpful subject matter experts in the space, the more you're able to glean what's top of mind for them. And it's much more likely that you'll gain the inside track to be much more successful at managing your bid review lead times. Next question is, how can a fiber, wireless, or traditional internet services company get new customers? So your company provides fiber, wireless, and traditional internet services, and you want to know how to get more new customers. Well, the first big question when we talk about a multifaceted product line where you do fiber, wireless, and traditional internet services is to analyze, do most of your customers, do most of your clients buy all three services, purchase all three services from your company? Or are they distinct lines of business, distinct client profiles? And the way you'll need to know that is to spend some time looking at your customer database and your customer relationship, your CRM system, and look at the patterns of who's most successful with your company. Where have you had the most success? Where are they the happiest? Where do they monetize the best? Look at those couple of things together and then figure out whether you need 3 different plans or one plan where you do adequate education and cross-sell is going to be effective. So with that in mind, we'll basically be figuring out, do we need 3 different kinds of clients that we go after, or is it one kind of client? Let's simplify it here and let's go with the idea that you've done your homework and there's natural cross sells between fiber and wireless and traditional internet services. And we're selling these largely to the same kind of company. So we look at what our most successful customers historically and currently have had in common. Are they a certain company size? Are they in a certain geographic location? Is there certain industries that they come from? Are there certain job roles? Are there certain technology platforms that they're invested in? Are there certain regulatory environments that they're subject to? All of these will help you figure out what your ideal client profile looks like, your ICP. Once you've defined that at a company level, then you can go about building a target account list. A target account list is a defined with a beginning, middle, and end, a finite list of companies. Typically, when people do this, it's anywhere from a few dozen, sometimes it's a few hundred. In extreme cases, it might be a few thousand of companies that fit your ideal client profile definition that you think would make amazing customers of your company if they just knew that you existed and the biggest reasons why they'd want to do business with your company in the first place. So once we've decided, or once we've figured out that our best customers all want fiber, wireless, and traditional services, and once we've documented what those clients, what those customers have in common, then you're going to go out and build a list of companies that fit that profile really well, but don't currently do business with you or may not even know that you exist. Because once we do that, then we can figure out who at the company. So we know at the company level who we're trying to do business with. Now we need to understand at the individual level who we need to build a relationship with in order to get a foot in the door with that company. And that's called defining your buyer personas. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal client based on some educated speculation and actual research. And the educated speculation can come from internal stakeholders at your company. It can come from your executive team. It can come from members of your sales or marketing or customer success team or product team. But I would caution you that your internal input for your buyer personas should be no more than 20% of the input. The other 80% needs to come from actual research. In a perfect world, the best way to do that actual research is to go out and visit your customers and interview them in their own environments. The second best is to do the same thing, but over a video conference, over a Zoom or a GoToMeeting or something, or a Google Meet or something like that, where you can interview them for 15, 20, 30 minutes or so. If neither of those two are options, then you're basically looking for a couple handfuls of representative clients that you can find on LinkedIn and look at their profiles and look at their search footprints, what shows up for that person when you do a Google search, and see what they have in common. And once you've figured out what this representative group of stakeholders have in common, you basically analyze that, roll it all together, and you have a buyer persona document that should be able to tell you what this kind of stakeholders' biggest goals are that they're trying to achieve in their professional life. What's super important to them for them to get a promotion, for them to get to the next level, to get a big bonus? How does that fit in with their team's goals? How does that fit in with their company's goals? And besides goals, we also need to get a grasp on what they're struggling with, what their biggest stressors are, what are their biggest challenges, what are the things that are causing them to have to pull all-nighters, what are the things that are causing them to miss time away from their friends and family and loved ones. Once you have consensus on that, it's much easier to build a buyer-centric go-to-market strategy that focuses on how you can be helpful throughout the full buyer's journey. Most companies, when they're brand new to this, are only showing up to help in the final 15 or 20% of the buyer's journey, when the person is already ready to talk with sales. But the reality is we now live in a buyer-centric world where there's a ton of research and comparing options and decision-making that's happening in the early and middle stages of the buyer's journey. If you're able to show up in the awareness and the consideration stages of the buyer's journey, you gain the ability to dramatically influence how those stakeholders evaluate and compare all of the other options that are in front of you. You gain the ability for your prospects to start to fall in love with your super helpful educational content. When they start to fall in love with your educational content, they start to fall in love with your brand affinity, the ability to be nearly guaranteed that you're on their short list. And in certain situations, if your content is so amazingly helpful, if your events like your webinars and other kinds of educational events are so amazingly helpful, you may completely dominate the short list to the point that you've neutralized all of the competitive options that are in front of them. So when it comes to getting new customers for your company, focusing on fiber, wireless, and traditional internet services, it's extremely important to invest in this customer insight so you know who they are and what they care about, and so that you can get out of the vendor box as rapidly as possible. And so you and your customer-facing, your client-facing team members can be seen more like subject matter experts, teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, and even raising the bar all the way up to thought leaders. When you do that, it can make an amazing difference in being able to grow with the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. If you completely ignore this and you bury your head in the sand and you try to pretend like your clients are still buying the same way that they did 10 years ago, you're really not going to get the ideal outcome, because unless you're selling to edge cases, and by edge cases, these are people that don't use smartphones, that have never discovered cloud computing, that don't use mobile apps. I mean, let's get real. Is your internal champion for fiber or wireless or internet services going to be one of those outliers? McKinsey found 70 to 80% of B2B decision makers now prefer a digital journey. So if you're going to be on the right side of figuring this out and staying relevant with your most important stakeholders, you need to meet them where they are, not where you'd like them to be, but where they actually are. And where they actually are is in a digital buyer's journey. They're asking hundreds of questions every single month on Google, on Siri, on Alexa, on Copilot, on ChatGPT, on YouTube, and of their peers. Even more importantly, they're asking their peers. So we need to make sure that we're showing up in all the right places in the right context so that they see us as the go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with wireless, fiber, and traditional internet services. And when you do that, it's a very natural call to action as they're consuming your content to, would you like a free needs analysis or a free consultation? Would you like to talk to one of our experts? Because they've already gotten a taste of what it's like to learn from your experts. That's the key thing, is we need to sell from a position of expertise and get out of the vendor box as quickly as possible to elevate the role of our sales, marketing, and go-to-market team. Next question up is, what are some sales and marketing strategies that are effective for tier 3 data centers? What are the most effective sales and marketing strategies for tier 3 data centers? At the top of the list, we need to figure out where our data center has been most successful historically. What kinds of clients have been most satisfied with the storage and the space and the power and the bandwidth, the whole solution, the managed services, whatever it is that your company provides? Where have we been most successful? Because once we do that, once we understand the pattern recognition, we can back into developing an ideal client profile. We can build out a target account list. We can figure out who the stakeholders are that we need to build relationships with in these companies. And we can set about creating a content strategy, an educational content strategy that allows us to proactively have a relationship with the most important stakeholders in these companies throughout the full buyer's journey, not just the tail end of the journey when they've already made up their mind on what they want, but so we can dramatically influence how they evaluate all of their options. At the top of the list, one of the no-brainer things that I would do is make sure that you have a fantastic video embedded on your site and on your YouTube channel and share it across all of the relevant channels. Certainly, you'd have a blog post about this and have email marketing about this and social about this, asking and answering the most super obvious question: what is a tier 3 data center? If your company is a tier 3 data center and you do not currently have a fantastic YouTube video and blog post and email nurturing piece that you repurpose across all of your relevant channels and answers that, I'd put that super high on the top of the list. Next up would be, what's the difference between tier 3 and tier 2 and tier 1 and tier 4? The more you can drive that home with real life examples of companies that have benefited from this and companies that have taken risks and had the opposite of a benefit, the better off you're going to be. Because at the end of the day, we need to recognize that the buyer's journey has changed quite dramatically. People are doing so much more research on their own before they get to your sales team. The latest research from Gartner found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey, researching, evaluating their different options, comparing options and evaluating pricing, now happens before sales contact. 10 years ago, it wasn't 83%, it was only 56%. So if I was hosting this event, if I was answering this question 10 years ago, a typical buyer's journey was about half over before your sales team met prospects. Now it's almost completely over. That is a game changer for what's necessary to be effective with your sales and marketing strategies, because we need to recognize that a huge percentage of the prospects for your tier 3 data center have become severely sales allergic. They just really want to take things into your prospects, really want to be in the driver's seat now. They're asking tons of questions on search, on social. They're asking their friends, their coworkers, their colleagues. They're asking Copilot. They're watching YouTube videos. They're attending webinars like this. They're listening to podcasts. So the most important thing that you can do is to figure out from what companies are our best customers coming from. And within these companies, what are the job functions? What are the roles that we need to be building relationship with? Who's your primary buyer persona? Who's your secondary buyer persona? And once we know that, and we know the biggest goals and challenges, we need to be able to provide proactive, amazingly helpful educational resources and insights to those buyers throughout the full buyer's journey, starting from the earliest point of awareness. So we cover as many of the touch points, the 28 touch points that come between complete stranger and purchase decision as possible. A lot of companies that are tier 3 data centers spend 50% or more of their marketing budget on field events, on marketing, on going to get booths at big conferences and throwing big lavish parties and everything like that. And they can be effective if you do your homework and you look carefully at the demographics of who you're sponsoring this event for. Obviously, if you're sponsoring it yourself and you have total control over who you're inviting in the guest list, that's a completely different story. That's a much better scenario. But what I caution you on all of this is no matter how helpful, no matter what impact that event has on growing your brand recognition, there's still 25 or 26 other touch points that you need to be in on throughout their full buyer's journey. Because it's very far-fetched that even if you throw this party annually at a particular conference, it's very far-fetched that your best prospects are going to wait another 363 or 364 days to see you again at next event. It's just, there's too much going on in their lives between then and now for that to be a realistic approach. So how do we make sure that we're building trust, that we're educating throughout the full journey? We understand what they care about, and we show up early and we show up often to continue to proactively provide the information that they need to close the gaps between where they are and where they want to be for their particular company. So we get very self-aware about the company size and where they're located and the business models in the industry they're in. And we get very self-aware about the buyers, the buyer personas that are going to care most about this. And we obsess about providing amazingly helpful educational content and events experiences. So they're spending a lot of time with our company. They're spending a lot of time with our subject matter experts. So we're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list when it comes time for them to purchase. And if we do this correctly, we can many times completely neutralize all of the competitive options in front of them, and our company becomes the short list. Yes, become a short list of one. Another thing that I would also caution you to think about is a tier 3 data center that's one location versus multi-location versus several locations. I do a lot of consulting with single location and multi-location co-location data centers, and even some national and global. And I tell you without a doubt that if you just have a single location and you don't have the ability to put servers in someone else's facility, even if you don't own that facility yourself, in another part of your region, another part of the country, you will almost certainly put an upward ceiling on the revenue that you can generate from a particular client and the sophistication level of that particular client. And if you're okay with that, it's fine. But I always like to point that out. There are companies that have done okay with that business model, but it's usually because they go for a bigger share of wallet, going into other adjacent kinds of businesses. Like they get much more actively involved in building out managed services. In some cases, they get involved in even providing digital marketing services, kind of like the domain of a digital marketing agency. Most of them that are single location that want to go sideways will get involved either in a lot deeper in managed services and or telecommunications or something like that. But if you're a tier 3 data center and you have multiple locations and you want a super effective sales and marketing strategy, start by understanding where you've been most successful, where your clients have been most successful, what that means to a documented single one-page ideal client profile, what that means to building out a targeted account list, how that factors into building out, researching and building out buyer personas and a content strategy that allows you to get found by the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all in the right context, so they see you and your team as the go-to experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with tier 3 data centers. When we come back, we'll look at 3 additional questions, but for now, we'll take a quick break for a message from our sponsor. The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry.
To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
Hey there, Joshua Feinberg here from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you're watching our weekly live stream, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, where each week I answer a handful or so of questions from the full go-to-market team from everywhere and anywhere in and around the data center ecosystem. So our next question that I'm going to be addressing for this week is, how can a digital power channel manager get bigger data center sales? So your company provides digital power and you work as a channel manager, a channel partner manager, and you're looking to get bigger data center sales. That is a fantastic question. So the first area that I'd caution you to think about is your company 100% focused on selling through channel partners, or do you have both a direct sales team and also sell to channel partners? The reason that that's relevant is if you already have a direct sales team that you're not on, and you're the channel manager or one of the channel managers for your company, in many cases, you likely already have great resources that can be repurposed for your channel partners. If you don't have a direct sales team, that's good and bad. It's great for your channel partners because they don't have to worry about channel conflict, but it's more work for you because you're going to need to figure out what are the tools that you need to develop to support and enable your channel partners. So let's go with the idea here that your company decides to be 100% channel partner focused. For companies that have investors that are venture backed, that are looking to grow aggressively, usually they don't quite have the patience to be 100% channel partner focused, and they have a combination of direct sales and channel sales. And you'll need to walk the delicate balancing act of deciding what kinds of opportunities you'll take direct and what kinds of opportunities should go to channel partners. Sometimes it's based on size of the deal or something that represents the size of the deal. Sometimes it's based on territories. But I can tell you without a doubt that if you don't think through how you're going to avoid channel partnership, channel conflict, at some point it will for sure come up, and you will have both angry internal salespeople and angry channel partners. So proactively deal with that, taking away a piece of terminology from the telecommunications industry. Think of your demarc, your point of demarcation, the dividing line between what is going to be a direct customer and what's going to be a customer that goes through a channel partner or channel partners. So with that in mind, to get bigger data center sales, there's a couple things that have to happen. One is the same kind of discipline that you would use to build a go-to-market plan for direct sales. You need to largely use the same kind of playbook for building a channel partner ecosystem, and be even more patient, because your direct sales team is working for your company a minimum of 40 hours a week, probably 45, 48 weeks of the year, and they're focusing 100% of their energy just on your company. You don't have the luxury of any of those things happening with your channel partners. So by definition, ramping up sales and marketing activities through your channel partners and servicing of his existing accounts through channel partners is going to take more work and more patience and more reps, more trial and error on your part. But at a very high level, one of the biggest mistakes I see channel partner managers make in small and mid-sized companies is they overestimate the brand reputation that they already have in the marketplace. And I've worked with both extremes. Early on in my career, I was fortunate to work with Microsoft's channel partner program for small and medium-sized businesses. At the time, it was called the Microsoft Direct Access Program. And even at that time, going back a couple of decades, Microsoft already had a very, very strong position in the IT industry and really didn't have to work that hard to get the attention of and win over potential channel partners. And obviously, as time has gone on, Microsoft has multiple segments where they hold a very, very strong, enviable position in and around digital infrastructure. You don't need to be a multi-billion-dollar company to have that kind of loyalty or have that kind of brand reputation in your space. But if you're starting from the other extreme, where the channel partners that you want to recruit don't know you exist, then you really need to go through a very similar kind of process as you would for building your client list. So we need to figure out, of your existing channel partners, what they all have in common. Are they a certain size, certain location, certain business model? If you have no channel partners at all, then we need to look around at, I'm going to assume that you're doing homework and you're looking at other channel partner programs for others in your space and figure out where they've been most successful and who would you like to win over onto your roster of channel partners. Once you have that figured out, then you're going to go about building basically an ideal client profile or ideal partner profile for what they all have in common. Once you have a single page document that defines what you're looking for in a channel partner, probably this will end up being great content for your copywriting for your channel partner page, your channel partner application on your website. But it will also give you exactly what you need to do to build a target partner list, very similar to what you'd go through to build a target account list. This is typically on a go-to-market playbook. This would be called like account-based marketing or ABM. You're doing largely the same thing, except instead of looking for great fit potential clients, we're looking for great fit potential partners. So we've documented our ideal partner profile. We're building out a list of anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand potential partners that we need to build relationships with. And then we need to figure out who the stakeholders are in these kind of channel partner companies that we need to get in front of. And you could brute force your way in strictly using outbound, strictly using LinkedIn connections or cold emails or maybe even cold calls. That last one probably won't be wildly successful in this day and age, but that's outbound. And then there's inbound, using content and educational resources to pull people into your ecosystem. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, but I would put this, the interesting thing is a lot of people put much less effort into recruiting channel partners than they do with clients. But it actually should be the opposite approach. Is recruiting channel partners is like recruiting key employees for your company or key members of your executive team, because in many ways, they're going to be like a commission only extension of your sales force or a revenue only or a variable cost version of a service fleet for your company for onboarding and ongoing professional services and integration, customization, and training. So most people have it completely backwards. They hire a channel manager and they assume that the channel manager is going to figure this all out without having resources to build a brand in the marketplace and create awareness. But it's a two-step process. You need to first create awareness and get new channel partners signed up. And then that's only maybe 10 to 25% of the battle. The rest of that is getting those new channel partners excited and activated and trained so they can hit the ground running and go start building awareness of selling your products and services into their clients, essentially what people call sell through. So you're coaching them and training them and supporting them as they build their book of business around your channel partner program. So this is where companies that start to get sophisticated realize that they need someone on channel sales. They probably also need someone on channel marketing, but in small companies, this may be a single person or hybrid kind of person that's responsible for all the recruitment of new channel partners and getting them signed up. And then there's a separate person, perhaps, and again, it depends on how you decide to define these roles, who's responsible for onboarding and training new channel partners and supporting them and helping them build a strategy, their go-to-market for how they're going to grow, how you're going to collaborate, how you're going to work and sell and support their clients together, and works with them on an ongoing basis. In really small companies, people try to get one magic person to do all three of these roles. The reality is in even slightly larger companies, there's channel marketing, there's channel sales, and then there's channel enablement or ongoing growth of that account. And if you're Microsoft, if you're Cisco, if you're Red Hat, If you're Google, you probably, if you're AWS, you really don't need to work too hard at recruiting channel partners. In all of those companies, granted, there are people whose job it is to grow awareness, to do channel marketing and channel sales, but they have it much easier. If you don't have that kind of brand recognition in the marketplace, you're going to need to invest time and resources and patience on the channel recruiting. And again, that's only half of the battle. Once you get them signed up as a partner, the next step is, unlike someone who works 40 hours a week on your sales team for 45, 48 weeks of the year, whatever it is, and lives to your company, their attention is going to be a lot more fragmented. So you got to do a lot more to stay with them and support them and help them grow their book of business. So those are some things to be thinking about if your company is in digital power and you're hiring channel managers and you want to get bigger data center sales. And over time, as you scale this up, one of the best ways to get your channel partners excited about leveling up to the next level of your channel partner program is to case study and interview your channel partners and invite them to events where they can cross-pollinate and meet your other channel partners, both virtual or offline events. But early on, just recognize that it's a process and it's a long game. It's a long process, and you need to get super clear on who your ideal partners look like, who the stakeholders are in these companies, how you're going to grow awareness and get them signed up, and then how you're going to support them, how you're going to enable them to get to these larger sales in much the same way that you'd support your own internal direct sales team. Next question up is, how do we sell green energy solutions to data center locations? So your company sells green data center solutions, green energy solutions for data center locations. So I would start by getting the location part correctly, getting the location part nailed down. In other words, are you able to sell to locations around the globe, or are you only able to sell on one particular continent or one particular country? So when we talk about locations, let's first figure out what is the geographic constraint that your company is currently operating within that you're trying to grow awareness. Is it global? Obviously, if it's global, we may need to do all of this in lots of different languages and localizations. If it's one particular country, one particular region, that's a different story. Once we understand the location, another big question is, are you selling to enterprise data centers? Are you selling to data center operators, like outsourced data center companies like co-location or wholesale or hyperscale or edge or modular, or all of the above? That will also help you define the business model part of your ideal client profile beyond the geographic part. And then the next area to think about as you're defining your ideal client profile is the company size. What company size are your energy solutions ideally suited for? Is there a certain minimum square footage? Is there a certain amount of megawatts they need to have in their facility? Are there certain platforms that they should be invested in? All of these will help to narrow things down. And if you want to make it a little bit easier on your marketing and sales team, see if you can match that up with employee headcount, because all the tools in places like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and LinkedIn Campaign Manager and most of the other databases that your sales and marketing would be using tend to go on employee headcount or revenue. Usually employee headcount is the much more straightforward one. So for example, is your company most successful in companies with 11 to 50 employees, 50 to 200, 500 plus, 1,000 plus, whatever it is? That will help tremendously. And then we need to know within these data center locations, who's the most important stakeholder that we need to be building relationships with? Is it a facilities manager? Is it a technology manager? Is it a network operations manager? In most cases, when it comes to energy, it's probably something related to facilities. And it will likely vary depending on the size of their company and the size of the number of stakeholders and how specialized they are versus generalists. But these will all be key considerations when it comes to selling green energy to data center locations. We have our final question that I will be addressing for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show is, how do we find new server technology hardware customers? So we're looking for new customers that want to buy server hardware for data centers. That's a fantastic one. So we want to start by looking at what kinds of data center customers have historically loved our servers. And the way most established companies do this is they broadcast it on their website on a case studies page. There's probably print case studies, PDF case studies, hopefully video versions of those case studies. Maybe you've interviewed some of your happiest server customers in webinars and in podcasts. Take all of that together and figure out what they have in common. Is there a certain company size that they tend to be from smallest to largest? In other words, are there companies that are too small or too large to benefit from your servers, or is it all of the above? Are there certain geographic regions where you've been most successful with your servers? That also will come into play as you define your ideal client profile. And are there certain kinds of businesses or industries or business models where you've been most successful? Once you know the answers to those questions on who's been the most delighted, who's given you the best testimonials, the best case studies, the best reference kinds of accounts, set about documenting your ideal client profile. And from there, you'll be able to build out a target account list of companies that look just like your most successful customers. This will be super important because that target account list will power everything you would potentially want to do with outbound and would potentially power using a platform like LinkedIn Campaign Manager to do very targeted ads. The next step is, once you know at the company level what's going on, we need to know who are the individuals, who are the most important stakeholders that we need to build relationships with when it comes to being in a position for evaluating and making purchase decisions on data center server technology. And in many cases, this might be like a network manager, a network engineer, a data center technology manager, a data center manager, or it may vary wildly depending on the size of the company and the size of the team at individual locations, and whether this decision making is done on a centralized or decentralized basis. These are all the kinds of things that you should start to see patterns on as you analyze where you've been most successful. But once we know that, once we know who the most important kind of stakeholder is that we need to build a relationship with, we're going to call that person a primary buyer persona. Once we know who the second most important kind of person is that we need to build a relationship with, we'll call that person a secondary buyer persona. And in some cases, you may have a tertiary buyer persona where they're influential to a certain degree, but they really don't have a ton of sway. But getting a foot in the door wouldn't be a bad consolation prize as a first step with all of this. If you do this the right way, when you have built out these buyer personas, that's going to power your whole content and event strategy. Because once we know the biggest goals and the biggest frustrations that your typical clients have when it comes to their server technology, we want to build very helpful educational content so that you and your team members are seen as the go-to experts in your space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with server technology, so that your team is able to change the positioning from being seen as just another vendor or just another salesperson to being seen as the go-to experts, subject matter experts in your space. So they're seen as teachers, trusted advisors, consultants, thought leaders. And that unlock gives you the key foot in the door that you need in the early and the middle stages of the buyer's journey. The latest research from Gartner has found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before you meet prospects. That's very different from as recently as 10 years ago, when that number hovered in the mid 50%. About 56% at the time was the number that CEB, the Corporate Executive Board that's now part of Gartner, found when they did some research with SiriusDecisions and Salesforce. So we're now to the point that it is a self-propelled buyer's journey. The buyer is very much in the driver's seat. And the only way that we're going to get a foot in the door, the only way that we're going to earn a seat on their side of the table throughout most of the buyer's journey, is we need to show up as teachers, as trusted advisors, as subject matter experts, and as thought leaders. And the way we do that is providing super helpful educational content for who they are, what they care about, what they're struggling with, and how others in their situation have navigated through finding the most effective server technology. When you do this well, you're almost guaranteed to be on the short list, and you will occupy a very high number of the 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. If you completely ignore this advice, most of the time you're going to be invisible. If you get invited in at all, for the final 17% of the journey, it is incredibly highly likely that someone or someone's else are the ones that have been doing all the education. They've been building all the trust with the prospects that you want, and they've been wildly successful in framing the purchase criteria that that prospect is going to use to evaluate all of the other options in front of them. So the question is, do you want to have a great relationship with your customers where you're in a position to be seen as the go-to experts and create incredibly loyal customers that onboard and expand and grow and ultimately buy dozens or hundreds or thousands of your servers? Or do you just want to be a commodity broker? If you're serious about growing your business highly effectively in today's buyer-centric, buyer-driven data center marketplace, I'd encourage you to make it a priority for you and your team to be seen as the go-to experts in your space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with server technology that's useful for enterprise data centers and outsourced data center operators. So that is the final question that we're going to have time for today. If you have an idea for another question that we should address in an upcoming show, I'd encourage you to place that in the comments area for wherever you're listening, and we'll get that added to the queue. To get notified about upcoming shows just like this, make sure that you subscribe or follow wherever you're watching this from. You can also subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes out weekly, delivered directly to your email inbox by visiting the DCSMI website. That's at DCSMI.com. I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. We really enjoy hosting these shows, answering your questions, and look forward to seeing you back again next week. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your week, and we wish you great success. Take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.